The events that transpired on July 10th, 1981 and their aftermath have become the stuff of legends. Fodder for tabloids and made-for-TV movies, the truth has eluded authorities even to this day as the town remains silent. But the incident's impact on those involved is clear to this day. This week's episode is The Killing of Kenrex McElroy, Part 3. Sinisterhood. The final... many people, I think, have banked these, so welcome if you haven't listened in a few weeks because you were waiting for part 3 to come out. Well, here it is.
Here it is. Yeah, and you're by this point, you're like, what? What's going to happen?
Yes,
I mean, this guy's a fucking monster.
Truly.
Nothing's being done about it.
No.
What happens when the law won't help you out or can't help you out?
Right? You start to see this. The tides are turning already. And there's like so much more that we couldn't even fit into this episode to even cover it, much less every single possible detail. But luckily for all of us, there's a 1991 movie with Brian Dennehy you can watch that's like pretty accurate, honestly. Too accurate. I was like, these are direct quotes from real people as dialogue in a made-for-TV movie. But Cloris Leachman's in it, so 50 out of 10.
Anything with Cloris Leachman is worth watching.
I love her. I'm going to figure out a way to work her into our Full Moon Energy tour.
Cloris Leachman.
I bet there's a way I could. I bet there's a way. I'll find a way. What you don't know with Full Moon Energy, our traveling show, is that every stop that we do, well, you do now because I'm about to tell you, there is a different special custom little part of the show that we change up every night. So one of these days, it's going to be a surprise Cloris Leachman in there. And by these days, I mean our final show at the Texas Theater
on October 17th. Sorry, I was looking up if Cloris Leachman was still alive, and she is not.
Well, you know what? She's in our hearts.
2021, but she's in our hearts still.
Forever.
So that's great.
Cloris Leachman may not be here, but we sure are and will be performing live at our hometown in Dallas. Our show about the moon. It's all about the dark side of the moon, what it does to people. Literally, it changes us. Or does it? What lurks up there, and what those astronauts saw when they were up there. It wasn't just moon rocks. I'll tell you that. It sure wasn't. No.
Yeah, we've learned so much about space, the moon, the government, lots of stuff. So if you would like to be educated, but also laugh, maybe cry, who knows what emotions this will bring out in you. But your last chance to see it is October 17th in Dallas.
Yeah. Head to sinisterhood.com/live shows and get your ticket before they're gone.
Well, it's time for part 3. So we're going to wrap it up in this one. I'm Christy.
And I'm Heather.
And let's get into it. By the summer of 1981, Ken McElroy's situation was deteriorating. After previously being acquitted of shooting his neighbor, Romaine Henry, in 1976, he was convicted of shooting another neighbor, Bo Bowenkamp. At 47, McElroy's health had declined due to a heart condition, which didn't stop him from drinking heavily, at least a bottle of Jack Daniels and half a dozen beers daily, while chain-smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes.
Yeah, he did not look great in the last days of his life. Quite puffy.
That's like me in college. That's too much. That's too much for anybody to consume. And every day. That's just... Deteriorating is what is going on inside of your body, for sure.
Literally. Yeah, I mean, he loved cowboy boots, and it was like you couldn't hardly get him off because that heart condition will make your extremities swell.
Yeah, your feet swell up and everything. Following his conviction for shooting Bowenkamp, McElroy continued to intimidate Skidmore with threats, stalking, and weapons. He had already paid $30,000 to his defense attorney for the Bowenkamp case and was facing an additional $20,000 for an appeal. Meanwhile, a petition circulated to ban McElroy and his family from Skidmore, with many residents eagerly signing.
I think this kind of shows something that before none of them would even look him in the eye, and now they're like, I'll put my fucking name down. Give me that petition.
Everyone reaches their breaking point at some point, and then when you realize, oh, we've all reached our breaking point, and he's just one person, well, just if you're playing a numbers game, we're going to win this.
And every bully, it's like the second you stand up to him. But I think these numbers too, the 30,000 for the defense of just this one trial was 30 grand. That's why Gene McFadden was like doing all, like, that's why his defense attorney was doing stuff. He was a cash cow. And just as many continuances, that's just money and money. And you see like that manipulation of the system for personal gain, not because it's good for your client, but because you're literally trying to get your client to manipulate the system, what that leads to. That like they couldn't get justice in court.
After McElroy's trial, he sat in the D&G Tavern with a bayonet, telling patrons he intended to shoot Bo Bowenkamp again. According to In Broad Daylight, Pete Ward, a WW2 veteran, spoke up, saying,
"Like hell you will."
Pete then drove home, grabbed his own high-powered rifle, and stood on the street in McElroy's path. He announced,
"If that son of a bitch comes up this way with a rifle, I'm going to blow him away."
McElroy never confronted Pete. He merely put Trina and his bayonet in his truck and drove home.
And that's the other thing is Pete was significantly older than McElroy. So having now this kind of, you shot Bo Bowenkamp, who was older, also a WW2 veteran, if I'm not mistaken. And now you have another one that's like, oh, you like to shoot old men? Fuck you. I'll get my gun. I'll shoot you first. And it's like, people are starting to lose it.
And everybody's got a gun.
No. And if you want a visual of this guy, he's played in the movie by Dr. Bob Kelso from Scrubs, which I thought was really good casting because he's like hell you will.
Pete reported the incident and convinced 3 other witnesses to join him in signing affidavits for the DA. A bond revocation hearing was scheduled for July 10th, giving the residents a date certain for getting McElroy off the streets. As his time ran out, McElroy began preparing for his death, convinced he didn't have long left, mentioning his final wishes to Trina and his children, and even signing a will.
Yeah, he and Trina got together with Gene McFadden and were like, if anything happens to both of us, make sure that the kids go to Alice, his prior wife. I guess, I don't know that they were ever married, but the prior woman he was with. And he was just telling people, like, he was giving money to people and being like, don't worry to pay me back. I'm not going to be around much longer. And you wonder if it was like, was he just thinking, I'm going to suicide by cop? Like, I'm going to, you're not going to take me? And making those comments like, I'll take somebody with me. Kind of deteriorating. Not like your mental health is also deteriorating of like a dog backed up into a corner.
Yeah, either not wanting to go and like knowing that I'm not going to go. So, or feeling like the residents are getting fed up and everybody, you got a target on your back and like 100 people that are trying to shoot you.
Right. And I was like, we didn't even have time to put the whole sub story of him menacing, doing exactly what he did to Romaine Henry's family and the Bowenkamps to Corporal Richard Stratton from the State Patrol. And Corporal Stratton told a friend of his, like, hey, tell Ken if he keeps fucking with my wife, I'm just going to shoot him on a back road and tell everybody it was self-defense and I'll get away with it. And then like suddenly all the stuff against him ended. So it was like all these people realized, oh, I just was like, I'll kill you first. And he freaks out and leaves me alone. It's like, well, now we've all seen.
Yeah, because he's a bully. And as soon as somebody stands up to him that he thinks is bigger or meaner or has better weapons, he backs down. The people he's bullying that he continues to bully are 15-year-old girls.
Yeah, or
but
like
when
a 70-year-old
man stands up to him, he's like, okay, I'll just kick rocks and go home. 5 days before the hearing, McElroy confronted Pete at home, but was scared off by neighbors before he could fire off a shot. McElroy then harassed the wealthier Clement family next door to Pete, believing they had also signed affidavits against him. Adult sons Dale and Greg Clement owned the D&G Tavern, a community gathering place. McElroy's choice to target them further united the town against him.
Yeah, now you start picking on everybody's friend, which is the bar owner.
Nobody wants the bartender to something to happen to him. That's your gathering place. It's your bar. You're like, we're defending the bar owner. On July 10th, the day of the hearing, dozens of residents gathered in downtown Skidmore to escort Pete and other witnesses to court, only to find out McElroy's attorney had secured a last-minute continuance, moving the hearing to July 20th. Now, with 10 more days before the hearing, a group of men convened at the Legion Hall to plan how to protect themselves from McElroy.
Yeah, you have like 60 people showing up, like trucks lining the street, like, okay, we're going to be very coordinated. Their whole plan's like, we want to be in the courtroom when when we have this hearing so that the judge knows it's not just like these 4 witnesses like don't like Ken McElroy. It's like, we're all fucking fed up. Every single one of us will raise our hand and testify. And then yet again, you have a dirty lawyer trick. And you're like, if he would have gone to jail that day, none of what is about to transpire would transpire.
Well, there you have it. Sometimes doing the sneaky little snake move, karma comes back and bites you in the ass. Mm-hmm. Around 60 men gathered at the Legion Hall, discussing whether to form a posse or provide informal witness protection to Pete and the other witnesses. After consulting with Sheriff Danny Estes, they agreed to form a watch committee to monitor McElroy's movements. Sheriff Estes then left town, reminding the group only to observe McElroy.
Which I'm sure that they're like, well, what if we, are observing him and he turns around and pulls a gun on him? And the sheriff was like, well, if he pulls a gun on you, you can defend yourself. So now you're sort of emboldening these people.
You leave town.
You're like, whatever happens.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I mean, the leaving of town to me was a clear indication the plan was in full effect. It was go time.
That's the people's argument. Like, everybody that was at the Legion Hall was like, this is what happened. Sheriff Estes said, I got to go talk to the county commissioner. I can deputize some of you perhaps so that we almost have like an official posse, but that won't be till later today. I'll be right back. And it's like, did he even leave town? Some people ask.
Mm-hmm. A local informed McElroy of the meeting, and he and Trina headed to town without his usual weapons. They entered the mostly empty D&G Tavern, where McElroy ordered a beer and cigarettes while Trina got a Pepsi. A filling station worker alerted the group at the Legion Hall to the McElroy's presence. Within minutes, 6 men filled the D&G, drinking and talking. Trina later recalled seeing the bartender fill empty cups with beer, apparently for free, as if the crowd was celebrating something and she and Ken were excluded.
That's an eerie feeling, like you're very outnumbered now, but that's the magic of standing up to a bully, is like the tables literally turn. That normally when he walked in, everyone in there was like, what's going to happen? And now he's sitting there going, oh, what's going to happen?
Taste of your own medicine. A single bar stool remained open next to McElroy. One neighbor took the seat, and McElroy asked whether the man still had a certain blue trailer for sale. The neighbor said he had sold it already, but clocked McElroy's attempt to prove he would recognize the man later if things went sideways. According to In Broad Daylight, it was around this time that a 9-year-old eyewitness saw a man exit the back of the tavern with a rifle. He told the little girl to go home, so she did. In later interviews, she refused to identify the man. Around 10:15 a.m., McElroy and Trina announced they were leaving and headed out for McElroy's Chevrolet Silverado. The watch committee, encompassing basically the entire tavern, walked outside to watch. Somewhere undisclosed, 3 men from the town made a plan. Each man carried a distinct firearm, a .30-30 rifle, a .22 rifle, and a shotgun. Trina McElroy later testified that Del Clement was one of the shooters. From the front seat of Ken's truck, she saw Del walk from the tavern to his truck across the street, cock his .30-30 rifle, and aim. She warned Ken that the men around them had guns, but Ken said nothing. He lit his cigarette and cranked on the truck's engine.
You're just sitting with your husband now in this Chevy Silverado, and there's like 60 people surrounding you, just staring at you. She later said they were smiling and laughing. The people that were there obviously said that's not true. They were just stoically standing there. But this is it's a moment where your life's about to change. Everything's fixing to change.
And can you really be that surprised when you have pushed people to the brink for decades with the most heinous abuse that one can think of? And perhaps one just accepts their fate at that point and lights a cigarette to have one last drag.
That's what I was thinking. It's like a firing squad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he knew it was time. And that's what he had, that Bic lighter in his hand and that cigarette in his mouth.
Mm-hmm. The first shot shattered the truck's glass, entered through McElroy's neck, and exited through his cheek. Another shot hit him. Then more shots rang out, 6 or 8 in total. Trina leapt from the truck, and Del's father, Jack Clement, pulled her to the safety of the town bank. Another witness reported seeing a second shooter behind the post office with a .20 caliber rifle. After the shot stopped, the only remaining sound was the roar of Ken's truck engine, burning out with his lifeless foot mashed down on the gas pedal. The engine screamed for 10 or so minutes before burning itself out and dying along with its owner.
And that's what people just saw the truck going like, and they're like, what do we do? And they're like, it'll die eventually.
Yeah. No, this is a very creepy part in the no one saw a thing, the reenactment, because it's a literal ghost town.
Yeah.
And there's one truck and it's just revved all the way up, blood everywhere. He's slumped over the steering wheel, and the streets, you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah, just
except
the smoke.
for the truck. But then the truck stops and it's like,
and it's just
crickets. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. Like a tumbleweed's going to blow by.
Someone inside the bank called for McElroy's brother to pick up Trina, while someone else called for an ambulance. McElroy's body just sat out in the truck, dead, alone, and attracting flies. Curious residents milled by in fits and spurts. Cheryl Bowenkamp looked into the pickup to see the man who shot her father and tormented her family, cold, dead, and covered in blood. A few of McElroy's hired theft workers came to see the body, feeling a mix of regret, mourning, and understanding at what the townspeople had done. When others learned of the news, they breathed a sigh of relief, while others whooped and hollered.
Yeah, when they drug Trina into the bank, she was like telling the bank worker, like, y'all didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that. And the sympathy that she got was like pretty much nothing. The bank worker said, yes, we did. You gave us no choice. Yeah. And after that, Trina, she sat in a chair and waited for Tim, the brother, to come pick her up, because it was like, these people they're here, they're not going to hurt you, but they're not here to coddle you.
No. I mean, for her to say, y'all didn't have to do that. Well, sure. Okay. You didn't have to, but they felt like this was the only way for anyone to get a good night's sleep again and not worry about their kids being taken from them, or their cattle being stolen, or, being sexually abused and assaulted. Yeah. I mean, at some point, if the cops aren't helping you out and he just keeps doing it, it's only human nature that everyone's going to band together to protect themselves and their own.
Right. And it's the feelings that each of the residents described. Like Lois Bowenkamp, which was wild to me, went into the bank when Trina was in there, and she said she didn't say a word. Like they just kind of looked at each other. And that when Cheryl, the Bo's daughter, looked in the pickup to see him, she's like, she watched it all happen from the store, which was right across the street. And she said, watching Trina getting drugged by Jack Clement while she's screaming and her arms are going, and she's like, my husband, oh my God. She said, I felt nothing. I felt no sympathy for her whatsoever. Because it's like when you see your 70-year-old dad on his birthday with his throat ripped open, bleeding out, and the person in the truck is the one that did it, and literally days before had a bayonet and was like, I'm going to go finish your dad off. You're probably like, and there it is. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Like you have to understand her point of view. Like to her, this man was the devil, and now the devil has been vanquished. Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably either felt nothing or relief or happiness.
Yeah.
The only people that perhaps felt a twinge of sadness, Trina, perhaps his kids, but she's also completely brainwashed and has been abused severely for, years. So, of course, but also, no matter what, sitting next to someone, your husband, and that happens, one of the most traumatic things I think you could go through. So they don't have to coddle her, but also understanding that she just witnessed her husband's head get blown off. So maybe we take some pity on her.
Right. And her entire life has not been sunshine and roses. It's not like she was like, this was she said it was the love of her life because she was brainwashed, like you said. But I think the treatment of his body afterwards, like the fact that his body just sat there, the blood congealed, the flies gathered, and people walked by like it was a bag of garbage.
That
tells
crazy.
You a lot.
Yeah. Well, and the sheriff's gone.
Yeah.
Nobody.
The sheriff's in another town.
Yeah. Or people are waiting to call the cops, and it's eerie to think that that's just how it used to be before these systems and stuff were in place. But people would just leave somebody out in the street and kind of went about their business like, well, that's taken care of, so now we can all go home and rest.
Mm-hmm.
When Sheriff Danny Estes and his deputy showed up around an hour after the shooting to check for a pulse, there were about 24 people gathered across the street from the pickup to watch. Estes was enraged at the scene and admonished everyone within earshot that the plan at the Legion Hall was just to watch McElroy, not fill him full of bullets.
He was screaming and swearing and like, I can't believe you did this. This is not what we discussed and da-da-da-da. But also, people did ask at the Legion Hall, if he pulls a gun on us, can we shoot him? So are you using the Uncle Jimbo, he was coming right for us, like defense? Or
it's all just an act.
Yes, what I'm saying. Yeah, he's like,
and you knew what was going to happen, but you got to admonish everyone so it seems like you're doing your job.
You look legit.
McElroy had been hit twice. One bullet from the .30-30 rifle entered the back of his head and exited through his lower left cheek. The other bullet from the .22 rifle entered through the top of his head and ricocheted inside his skull, likely killing him. The 6 to 8 other shots only hit the truck and not McElroy or Trina.
I think if the .22 had not hit him, the .30-30 shot might have killed him because of how far away. I think it took like 30 minutes for ambulances to get there, so he probably would have bled. I don't think anybody's going to run over there and like hold on to his wound.
No, I mean, I think that there was no chance they were leaving him alive.
No, and I think the two different shooters from two different angles, because one went back of like kind of beneath your right ear out through his left cheek, and the other one went in his skull like above his left ear from like a very different direction. So it's like two different weapons, two different directions. Like there was a plan.
100% there was a plan. The weapons used to kill McElroy were likely destroyed by the time the ambulance arrived on scene around 11:30 a.m. According to author Harry McLean, within an hour of the shooting, 3 or 4 individuals gathered at a nearby farm, dismantled the murder weapons using a sledgehammer and blowtorch, and disposed of the pieces in deep wells located west and south of town.
And that's what, like, Harry McLean got the info out of people, the author of that book, but nobody would tell him, like, he didn't publish any names, and nobody would tell him, like, exactly where. But it was, nobody's finding this. These are in, like, dismantled, scratched up, like, the serial numbers are gone, like, there's no trace.
They had a meeting, and... Yeah. Like all good planners, you got to account for the various situations and what you might have to cover up. And I also, just given the times, it's not like now where there would be a mass like search for these weapons and whatnot. You go to somebody's farm, throw it down a well. That's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. One piece on one well, one piece in a pond, one piece over here. And I think if you had a law enforcement official on the team, probably would give you some insight into ways for things not to be found.
True. Young witnesses who had seen one shooter leave the tavern with his rifle and another shooter behind the post office were told by their parents not to tell a soul what they had seen. Trina, on the other hand, told police within a few hours of the shooting what she had seen. Del Clement killed her husband using a rifle positioned right across the street.
So her allegation was that he was shooting the .30-30, which hit Ken in the neck and came out his cheek. And then the post office shooter was holding the .22, kind of triangulating him. And the shotgun man obviously didn't get any shots off. There was arguments of whether some of the ballistics in the truck maybe could have been like shotgun pellets, but most of the shots were from those two rifles.
Trina McElroy was the only witness willing to come forward. Due to Sheriff Estes' involvement in the Legion Hall meeting and District Attorney David Baird's role in prosecuting McElroy, the case was turned over to the Northwest Missouri Investigative Squad, or NOMIS. The NOMIS team interviewed hundreds of witnesses, including Del Clement, who strongly denied any involvement. According to In Broad Daylight, when asked if he shot McElroy, Clement replied,
"Boys, I wish I could say that I'd done it because he sure had it coming, but I didn't. He stole our livestock, shot our horses, and raped our women."
Well, there you have it. I mean, no one's going to admit it. And you got to... They all made an oath at this meeting. And I have to commend people that can all stick to keeping something secret for... I mean, most of them are dead now. Imagine going to your grave knowing this. But also, like, that's that small town bonding and mentality. And when they've all experienced this trauma together, it's like, and now we're all going to collectively get rid of it and collectively keep our mouths shut because we're all better off in their opinion.
And that's
everyone's
why,
opinion.
right. And objectively. And that's some of the residents went so far as to admit that they would not say who, but they said men that were at that meeting at the Legion Hall essentially popped their heads into like storefronts and knocked on doors and basically said, we're going to take care of McElroy. Don't worry about it. We just need you to stick with us. Like, we need you to back us up. Essentially, as long as nobody cracks, we'll all have a happy life and a happy ending. And that's the question is, do you end up with a happy life and a happy ending with this, cloud hanging over the town now because of it? But you can see Clement was not afraid to express how happy he was that it happened. And Trina was like, to her grave was like, no, that was Dale Clement. Like, I saw him with my own eyes. I know who he was. But I would say my order of things that I care about, I would not probably put raped our women last after the livestock and the horses, but that
true. Yeah,
perhaps
that's
was
going
a
to be
sign
number one.
Yeah, but you could tell they were all keeping score for sure.
Yeah,
of all the things.
Nobody was upset, and in fact, probably most people thought it was long overdue. Most farmers were irritated at the questioning, refusing to provide any details and explaining to officers that they felt the issue was now resolved. For anyone present at the shooting, their stories remained the same. They heard shots, hit the ground, and didn't see a thing. Each time one of only a handful of witnesses seemed willing to crack, they would recant within minutes or hours. McElroy had taught them all the same lesson many times over the years. No witnesses, no case.
Yeah, and back in the, early 1980s, they didn't, like you said, have, cameras around town that you could have these external bits of evidence, like forensic evidence. They did say they checked bullet trajectory, which seemed like one of the shots perhaps came from an up higher angle or like the angle from behind the post office. It was confirming that, yes, there was more than one shooter, but the only way that they were going to know who would be eyewitnesses who were all like, I just saw the truck as I dove under it, or I just was looking at my feet because I thought the bullets were coming at me. And the officers that were from, because the NOMIS squad's like not local, and they're just like, these people won't talk to me. And everyone just feigned like small town ignorant farmer, like, I don't know, man, I don't know.
A media frenzy followed an initial report in the Kansas City Times, labeling McElroy's death a
vigilante killing.
As locals felt they lost control of their portrayal, they stopped cooperating with the media, which only further fueled curiosity and speculation.
And like a lot of the articles I found were like wrong. Like his age was wrong, his name was wrong, the dates were wrong. It just became this like grab to like who can get the most like salacious details. And because locals weren't talking, they just sort of started making them up. But even like when People magazine came, they had Juarez, the son was like 12 or 13 at the time. They're like, hey, why don't you pick up one of your dad's big rifles and we'll take your picture with it. So there's this picture of little Juarez that got printed in People magazine holding the rifle. Well, now Alice sees her son being portrayed as like a chip off the old block. And it's your 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's one thing that, I guess two things. They don't like huge assholes, but small towns also don't like the media descending on their town and just making it a circus, especially when you're, as a town, while he has been killed and everything, that's still like a lot to deal with and process. So you've got you're trying to work through with like everyone in your face getting answers. And you're like, listen, we're not telling you shit. So leave us alone.
And it would be like in the cafe, like you're right. You're exactly right. The media, like the journalist would walk in and the cafe's like, silence. And it's like, the literal waitress would be like, we don't serve your kind here. Please leave. Like outsiders, you're not from here and you need to leave here. And it was like, okay. And then they would go out and report, we tried to interview them, but this mean, crazy town kicked us out of the cafe. And it's like, well, now we just look like worse assholes. And like y'all, the problem was, I think a lot of McElroy's prior crimes, they would say like he was a bully. He was arrested a lot, but never convicted. It was like, you are not saying it what it is, which is he is a serial rapist, sex offender, a stalker.
Rural terrorist. He's all of
perfect.
it. Yeah. They minimized it quite a bit. And then, like we've seen in so many cases we've covered, when they don't get the answers, they just start making shit up. And then you're like, well, I got to unwind all these lies that have been told, or just be like, fuck it. I'm going about my life. They can think what they want.
We're going to go on with our business and they can go on with theirs.
Trina and her attorney, Richard McFadden, gave multiple interviews defending Ken. Trina said,
"He was a good-hearted person. He was good to his kids and good to me."
When asked about his violent actions, she claimed,
"They're making most of it up. He was just a man who would stand up for his rights."
She further denied allegations of abuse, threats, or theft, saying,
"It's all lies."
Her continued defense of Ken, however, turned the town's sentiment against her further.
Yeah, you imagine her going on TV crying, being like, "Feel bad for me." Oh, but he never did anything. They're like, "Fuck you."
Yeah. Also, you took place in a lot of it. So don't come saying that none of this happened when you know for damn well it did, because you were there.
She held a lot of people at gunpoint at his direction. To be fair, I mean, at her very abusive husband's direction. But that was the memory a lot of people have of this woman. And in their head, they're like, "Oh, well, we knew her before and she was always sweet. Ken's probably just making her do it. Well, now he's dead. She could, but how equipped are you to grapple with the abuse that you've had your literal entire life? And then, all of a sudden you're like, you have clarity on 60 Minutes. Like, no, you're going to keep the same toe the same line you have, even though he's dead. He's probably still alive in your head."
She's got kids with him.
Yeah.
So, and then, she suffered years of abuse. He controlled her. So just because he's gone, that doesn't necessarily mean like she's out of his control mentally. Right. She's still under it. The Nomas investigation was called off after 10 days due to a lack of witness cooperation. It reverted back to Sheriff Estes, who declined to pursue the matter further for the same reason. McFadden alleged in a letter to the U.S. attorney that McElroy's civil rights had been violated, leading to an FBI investigation. The FBI's involvement angered Skidmore residents. They had been ignored by the system when McElroy repeatedly violated their rights, but now faced an FBI investigation over his death.
Right?
That
you feel some type of way.
Piss me off so fucking much. You're like, where have you been, assholes? And then also when the media is like, well, what happened? How much time you got?
Right?
Like a week for me to sit down and like list out all the heinous crimes he's done. Like, we don't want to go over that again because it's not really y'all's business. When we were trying to bring it up, nobody gave a shit and we're scared of him. And now everybody wants us to cooperate and make a big deal out of it because he's gone? No, fuck off.
Yeah, 100%. They were like, nobody gave a shit about our rights. Like, we have a right to face our accuser in court, like go to trial. None of this charges have never been brought. But the allegation from McFadden is what would be called a 1983 lawsuit, which is where you allege that your civil rights have been violated by a state actor under color of law. So they're acting under their official capacity as sheriff in this case, or as mayor in this case. And the allegation is that while performing their official duties, they told the citizens, go and kill him. And that's not, you have a right to, a lot of different rights would be violated in that. But that was the allegation, is that it was masterminded by Sheriff Estes and Mayor Steve Peter.
Possibly. They're dealing with it just as much as maybe not direct victims, but they're the ones getting all the calls and they're like, we can't do shit. This is just going to continue. And is it crazy that the sheriff who could arrest him instead concocts a plan for the townsfolk to kill him? Yeah, but is it impossible? No, I think it's quite probable.
And even I believe Sheriff Estes later admitted that, no. He said it while Trina was in the car. He pulled Ken over on a back road one night and was like, let them go that night, but said like, one of these nights, I might just kill you and tell everybody it was self-defense. Kind of the same thing Corporal Stratton said. And I think she took that as they wanted him dead and they were going to shoot him anyway. But they were, but also for reasons. Like the reason was he was this uncontrollable, menacing presence. So to have the FBI come in though is a huge slap in the face.
Yeah. On July 21st, 1981, a coroner's jury convened under Missouri law to determine the cause and responsibility for McElroy's death. Witnesses, including the mayor, bartender, and police officer, testified that they had not seen the shooter. Trina, however, pointed to Del Clement as the killer. The jury ruled that McElroy had been unlawfully killed by
person or persons unknown,
solidifying Skidmore's reputation as a town of vigilantes.
Yeah, pretty much Trina was the only one that would say a name. And so you have the wife who's lied on the stand before. So the state can bring up the fact that, like, remember how Ken McElroy burned your parents' house down and you brought charges and then you later lied and said you did? Like, here's 53 times you've lied under oath before, which sucks for her because I believe her. I think she saw probably what she said she saw.
I mean, it makes total sense that he did it. I don't think he did not do it. He's just not admitting to it. But yeah, I think she saw it happen.
No, and it was the first time that the Clement family had been targeted by him. And I think Del Clement was like, fuck you. I've got fuck you money. I own the tavern. He had more power. He had a lot of like business dealings. So he felt like you fucked with the big boy now. So I think she was right. But, you know, as a jury member, you could say absolutely he was shot by two different guns in a premeditated murder. But there is no one except this unreliable witness.
That is also very connected to him. So
yeah, exactly.
Unreliable for multiple reasons. But it bums me out that they got painted as a town of vigilantes, because I think when most people read or hear that word, it brings up a negative connotation, or like rebel, and you know, like there's
Wild West.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, vigilantes also protect the whole town because they're like,
you know who's a vigilante?
We're getting the cancer out of here. Yeah.
Batman. Batman's a vigilante.
I was going to say Robin Hood, but also
yeah,
Batman. Yeah.
Truly. But yeah, you think about that of like, well, the police won't take care of me. It's like, well, I will. And we, in most media, we exalt that person. Is that right that we do that? I don't know. It's a question we all have to grapple with. Depends on which Batman.
In August and September of 1981, a state grand jury spent 8 days on the McElroy case, hearing from 45 witnesses, including Trina, who again accused Del Clement. No indictments were issued. By September of 1982, the year-long FBI investigation concluded and found insufficient evidence to prove McElroy's rights were violated. Referred back to DA Baird, the case stalled as most witnesses had recanted, leaving only Trina, who had lied in previous proceedings. In November of 1982, Baird announced no charges would be filed without more substantial evidence. At the same time, the McElroy farmhouse outside Skidmore burned down. By then, all of its residents had left. Trina had moved to the Ozarks and married someone new, cutting off contact with Alice, Sharon, and their children.
Yeah, they said before they all left the farmhouse, people would drive, like town folks would drive by and like shoot at the house, scream stuff at the kids, shoot at the kids, like stuff like that I can't get behind. Like you took care of the problem. If they're not bugging you, you shouldn't bug them. But I think that goes to show how even though he was shot dead in the street, the phrase that his family members like to use was like a dog. They shot him in the street like a dog. I don't like that phrase, but that is what they equated it to, because I think they're trying to imply that he was less than human. I still think you should not do that to dogs, but it's a turn of phrase. But this concept of you've done enough. Like you slayed the giant. You don't have to go to the giant's house and scream at his wife who's crying.
It's like when we were just watching the Scott Peterson documentary. Yeah. It's like no one needs to yell, I hope your son burns in hell, to the mom who's like struggling to breathe on an oxygen tank. Like she's heartbroken too. You know, like you did what you needed to do. He's gone. And though they've probably suffered way more than you even know. They lived under the same roof with him. Yeah. So how about just leaving them be? Unless they start shit and then talk to them. But like, they're just trying to like exist at this point.
I am happy for Trina, though, that she got to move. And I think for the kids, too, it's probably best like having that cloud over you, you know, that last name. Sinisterhood will be right back. Being an adult has its high points, like you can eat ice cream for dinner anytime or doom scroll until sunrise. Guilty on both counts. But it's not all fun. You also have to do things like your taxes, womp womp, and figure out what's for dinner every single night. And you also have to make doctor's appointments.
They're so daunting. They can be, and they used to be for me until I discovered ZocDoc, the healthcare app that makes adulting that much easier. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment.
We've both used ZocDoc. Our husbands have used ZocDoc. It really does change the feeling from, I got to go see insert whatever type of doctor here, from a, God, I don't want to have to do that, to like, oh, I'll just check it on ZocDoc.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes that dread away from it, truly.
Never can find my insurance card, but it's all stored in ZocDoc. So the other day I was like, let me just pull it up here because I don't have a physical copy. So it's great. And I love that everything is simplified. I don't like having to do a bunch of tasks to complete, like little tasks to get the big one done. But this, it's all right there. So it does it all for you.
All in one app. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skin care, and much more.
Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. You can filter specifically for doctors who take your insurance, are located near you, and treat almost any condition you're searching for.
So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/creepy to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today.
That's ZocDoc.com/creepy. ZocDoc.com/creepy.
Sinisterhood will be right back.
Trina waited until July of 1984, just one day before the 3-year statute of limitations ran out, to file her civil lawsuits in both state and federal courts for Ken's wrongful death. She named the city, the county, Sheriff Estes, Mayor Steve Peter, and Del Clement as defendants. The suit alleged that a formal plan was made at the Legion Hall to kill Ken, sanctioned by the mayor and sheriff, and carried out by Del Clement. Trina sued for $6 million in damages. After sitting for a deposition during which she forgot many key details and was challenged on her ever-changing stories, she decided to settle out of court. She received $17,500 in total.
Which some people, when they heard the $6 million, they were really pissed. But it's like, you have to understand that's just what you're asking, not what you'll get. But when she got $17,500, it was like $12,000 from the county, some from the city, and some from, I think Del Clement paid like $3,000 just to be done with it. And people around town were like, how much was it? $17,500? That's a good deal to get rid of him. It was worth it. And like would make that kind of like joke, which would be another reason why I probably wouldn't want to live in that town, you know, if it was my family. But that's how they felt, you know, small price to pay.
I mean, honestly, if you're asking for $6 million and you end up with less than $18,000, that is a small price to pay.
Well, and I think from her attorney's standpoint, you know, it's McFadden. He's back, right? He's still trying to figure out how to milk that last bit of money out of the McElroy estate. And she realized pretty quickly in the deposition, like, I think probably she blacked most of it out. You know, July of 1984, you're probably getting deposed the fall of 84, early 85. This happened July of 81. You know, that's like 4 years plus a ton of trauma that you probably have just pushed down inside of you. So they said she was just super shaky in the deposition, and the attorney was like, we're just going to get the bare minimum amount of money that we can get.
Honestly, the relief of just it being finished was probably worth it.
That's what she said. I just don't want to be talking about it.
In her later years, Trina became more realistic about her life with Ken. In a 1987 interview for In Broad Daylight, she admitted to participating in crimes against Skidmore residents, saying,
"Yes, I did it, but I never knew why. I was told to get the gun out and I did it. I always did as I was told."
She viewed the path she took with regret, framing it as a necessity rather than a choice, saying,
"You know, I wish I'd listened to Ginger and the others back then. It was a mistake to go back. I just had nowhere else to turn. If I had it to do over, he wouldn't be in my life." Man.
Once she got some distance from it and processed what had happened, I mean, how could you not be like, yeah that was he was a monster. But and it shows you, like, I believe her. She didn't ask questions. She just did as she was told, and had since she was, when did he, 13, 12 is when he started having a relationship. I can't even call it that.
Grooming.
When he started sexually assaulting her. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she was just a kid and,
Yeah.
you know, mentally remains just a kid under his thumb the whole time. I wouldn't ask questions either.
No, because you understand that the second she tried to leave, we did everything we talked about in part 2,
Yeah.
you know, including burning her parents' house down. So I think you just realize like, oh, well, literally to survive, I just have to say yes, Ken, at everything. But the description of her husband, I was very happy that she found someone that was like sweet and soft spoken and just looked at her like she was just the most beautiful thing and treated her very well and like sat very patiently with her and like let her talk versus a man who was like, women shouldn't be in charge, like women shouldn't be the boss and stuff. So I'm happy for her that having been literally plucked from the schoolyard by this monster, that she got a little bit of a happy ending, it sounds like.
By 1987, she seemed to be healing, telling McLean,
"It's over for me. I don't really hurt anymore."
After marrying her second husband, Howard, they built a life together in Kansas, where Trina became known for her kindness and willingness to help others. She worked at a boat store and was remembered fondly by her family as a loving mom, grandmother, and great-grandmother when she passed away in 2012 at the age of 55.
And it's like, what are we except the sum of all of our acts? And the second that she was away from him, all of her acts, like everybody that described her in all of her obituaries and memorials were like, she was my neighbor, she was my helper, she was my coworker, she was my friend. You know, we went to church together. So I think you can see like when you get that distance from your abuser and who made you complicit in the abuse, like when you get to choose, you choose good.
The negative press from the incident drove Skidmore's population down from around 440 when Ken was shot to around 200 or less today. Cheryl Bowenkamp told filmmakers there was no reason for anyone to move to the town unless they just loved the place like her. People have moved away owing to the shrinking economy, increased violence, and other impacts of the methamphetamine epidemic that ravaged the town. Its deteriorating condition has also led some to speculate the town is cursed.
Yeah, 2 of those episodes of No One Saw a Thing are about these other unsolved crimes that have happened there. And the filmmakers sort of ask like, is it the town's culture of silence that led to, you know, these cases happening here? And I think the answer is it's, you know, poverty, methamphetamine in a lot of cases, very bad luck in another case.
Yeah, I don't think the two are necessarily tied. And I feel like it's insulting and minimizing when people are like, the town is cursed.
Yeah.
No, the town was held literally at gunpoint for decades by this menace and eventually cracked. So I don't think that they're cursed. They were cursed perhaps in all the abuse they endured, but then they decided, well, we're going to break this curse. But that didn't lead to other crimes happening. I mean, crime happens anywhere. So Ken's whole thing could have never happened. And then those 2 murders still happened.
Right. And I think too, it discounts the systemic issues that lead to stuff like that of like, why is everyone in town doing methamphetamine? Well, it's because farming. Well, why is farming down? Well, why? I mean, it lets you sort of quickly hand wave like what are huge issues that need to be addressed, like poverty and that like shrinking middle class, and a way to go, well, it was a curse or whatever. I do think the silence did something to the people, just as secrets often do, because in I think it was in the book, he talked about the pumpkin show, the 1985 pumpkin show. Like they have a little Miss Pumpkin pageant, and you know, it's like tween girls or whatever, and they're like, well, what could you do to change the world? And she's like, if I could change the world, there would be no more murders. And the person goes, well, why is that? Which, why do you ask why? Honestly, like, you don't, there should be no more murders.
Like a good answer, I think.
Period.
I mean, wouldn't that be cool if there weren't any more murders?
But when pressed, she was like, well, because then I could sleep at night. Like I have like nightmares. Like I think people, it still shook them that there was like maybe this bully, or, you know, I don't know if it's like the fear that someone like Ken will come back, or the fear that like this town is like, don't fuck around because we're capable of taking care of our own. But it definitely, I think, affected people and probably led to a lot of them leaving.
Harboring a secret like that, well, that could eat away at you, certainly.
Wild to me that his brother lived there, though, and they said he just didn't go to the businesses or talk to him. He said, well, what happened to my brother was between him and the town, and I didn't want to leave. I'm like, what?
I mean, if that's your home and he wants to stay there, it's kind of like the Laramie, you know, like if people are like, this is where I live, this is my home. I don't want to leave my home. I'm sorry that all that stuff happened, but that's not me.
Yeah.
In 1988, Harry McLean's book In Broad Daylight was published. 3 years later, it was adapted into a made-for-TV movie starring Brian Dennehy, Cloris Leachman, and Chris Cooper. Centered around the character Lynn Rowan, at least one reviewer claimed Dennehy's portrayal of Ken was
dead on. He looked like him, walked like him, had the same mannerisms and speech patterns.
Years later, McElroy's grandson, Devin Linder, who never met his grandfather, recalled to interviewers how his 8th grade school teacher made the entire class watch the film as part of its history lesson on Wild West vigilantes. Devin told No One Saw a Thing interviewers,
"It hurts because I don't look at my grandpa like that. It's something that bothers me that people said had to be done and not anything has been done or said about it afterwards."
That would be a real kick in the nuts to have to watch this with your 8th grade class when surely the teacher knew his relationship.
Right. His last name is different. So his dad was like, he was sitting there in class going like, do I say something? Do I like raise my hand and be like, actually, but instead you're just all your classmates are like, yeah, shoot him. And the person they're all cheering to be killed is your grandpa. And honestly, the movie does a little bit to show what Ken did as far as menacing the people involved. But like, take what is depicted in the movie, which is free to watch on YouTube and linked in the show notes if you're interested. Like multiply it times 100. Like that's how bad it was. But it's like you can't have a 6-hour long movie. We have a 4-hour long podcast about, when you put all the parts together. But like seeing that depiction of your grandpa would definitely give you a different view. But it's like every violent person has people that love them. Yeah,
for sure. McElroy's many children were indeed left to grapple with his legacy. His daughter Toni said her brothers suffered more than Ken's daughters. As young men, they were often pigeonholed and automatically blamed for mischief, accused of being carbon copies of their famous father. Some even appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in the 1990s to try and humanize their father and share their pain. But Toni was grateful that despite what happened to their father,
it didn't break us.
The adult children found solace in each other and in raising their own kids and grandkids.
And yeah, No One Saw a Thing. They do interviews with a couple of them as adults, and you can kind of see like if you didn't know, it just looks like a fun little family jumping on a trampoline, like not knowing that dad and grandpa was this like legendary figure essentially,
which is everyone. That is the family of someone like that. Although Ken's other son, Tony Surratt, looks like a carbon copy of his father, having his mother's surname throughout his life helped him avoid the same harassment as his brothers. The boys weren't entirely innocent, however. Favored son Juarez spent some years getting into scrapes with the law before he was convicted of stabbing a man in 1989. After serving his time, Juarez has dedicated his life to raising his children and running a ministry aimed at helping other formerly incarcerated individuals.
And he says in that No One Saw a Thing, like, I was exposed to it as a kid. Like, of course, I started doing drugs super early. He was like, my dad went out in the most violent way, like a cowboy. Yeah. So he's, he's got like this little, like his leather vest with the cut off sleeves and stuff. But you can tell he got close to it. And like when he came out was like, I don't want to do the same thing that my dad did. I don't want to make those mistakes. I want to be a good dad. I want to be present, and really has dedicated his life to peace and no nonviolence. Like all the kids seem like the other son that's in California that's like a special education teacher. Like they all seem like they wanted to not distance themselves because they all will say he was a great dad. Yeah, he hung the moon.
They're like, we love him. You can hold two truths in your hand at the same time. And and even one of his daughters in the No One Saw a Thing says, like, I know he did all these terrible things, but he was also my dad and I loved him.
Yeah. And he was a great dad. And that Brian Dennehy portrayal takes time to show kind of this eerie juxtaposition of like this Al Capone-like character, but like a country version of it, holding his kid playing Itsy Bitsy Spider, being like, yeah, I'm going to take a gun over and show him what's what. Yes, baby, daddy loves you. But like
Tony
kind of
Soprano.
Yeah, it's very Tony Soprano-ish for sure. So, but you can see from their perspective, like, it's hard to know those things that your dad did, especially when the victim in a lot of cases was your mom.
Yeah. McElroy daughter Toni Gobin attributed the town's downfall to its own actions and refusal to take accountability, saying,
I think the town is kind of cursed, so in their own way, they're punishing themselves.
She offered that perhaps if residents admitted who the killer was, the town could recover. When several longtime residents were interviewed for No One Saw a Thing in 2018, they still refused to name the shooters. They did, however, confirm that all 3 involved in the plot were dead.
Which mathematically makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that was in 2018.
But isn't it wild that even after they're like, we're taking it to our grave. They went to theirs and they took it.
Yes.
And now it's on us. Like, we're not going to sell them out just because they're dead now.
Every single one of them, even as just like candid as they are with the cameras, like very open about the town and what's going on and everything, still are like, I will not tell you who they are.
Yeah.
I will not say that. I made a vow and I will not do it. And you're like, oh, okay then.
One of the documentarians asks, do you know who killed Ken McElroy? And she said, no. And he goes, would you tell us if you did? No. So it's like, you're just at a stalemate. Yeah. Like, they're not going to tell you, you know? So it becomes like a challenge, I think, for the media. Like, who can get the story? Who can get him to crack? No one is going to crack.
No.
Till they take their last breath, this secret dies with them.
And some people wondered, like, oh, okay, well, maybe the ones that did it, there'll be like a deathbed confession. Nope. I don't think that they would want to give him or his family the satisfaction. Wild. And they also, like, they all made a vow and they were very serious and committed to upholding it. And they, all the way to the end. The X someone carved into the ground outside the tavern where Ken was shot has since worn down over time. The question of who is responsible is still unanswered. Longtime resident Kirby Gosley told filmmakers for No One Saw a Thing that no one will ever know the real story. There's one truth in what happened, and only the people that were there know what it was. Some of the people were really glad he got shot. Some of the people didn't process it for weeks or months or years later. But all of them kept quiet. Sinisterhood will be right back. Well, as far as undergarments go, I am a picky person. It's not just undergarments. Honestly, every facet of my life, I have to feel comfortable, but I also am not, I want to be effortlessly put together without looking sloppy, but also without being in pain. And listen, I have a lot of needs, but my SKIMS bra actually fits these needs. Like, I feel good, I feel confident, comfortable, and I don't feel like I'm being pinched or hurt. It feels great.
Right? But at the same time, you're like, I'm not walking out completely bare. You feel like, like you can take the girls out if you want to, but you're not going to have like you can't breathe and you just can't wait to get home and take your bra off.
Right. Or have like red marks on my skin where something's been poking me or pinching me or something like that. That's why I love the Fits Everybody t-shirt bra from SKIMS. It is so comfortable. I didn't know why they were called t-shirt bras before or whatever, but it feels good and it looks good under shirts and it is very comfortable.
It's I see why people love them. Is your favorite tee. Yeah. I always thought too, like, is it because they look good under t-shirts? Yes. But also I think because it just is as comfy as a t-shirt that you don't even really think about it. Shop SKIMS Bras at skims.com. Now available in 62 sizes, 30A through 46H.
If you haven't yet, be sure to let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Sinisterhood will be right back.
Observers still grapple with one simple question. Did the killers, or the town itself, commit an atrocity or simply rid themselves of a cancerous presence? Trina summed up her feelings to author Harry McLean.
Ken maybe shouldn't have done what he did, but they shouldn't have either.
Well, that's a nice quote to lead us into. So what do we think? What do you think about what Trina has to say?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Lois Bowenkamp kind of said in the immediate aftermath when interviewed, they're like, what do you think happened to him? And she's like, I think he lived by the gun and died by the gun. And, from a sheer, I don't think that vigilante justice is often the answer, but I think you can understand certainly when people literally do think it is an existential threat. And he made it clear to everyone he was involved with, and as good of a dad he was and as sweet of a husband as he was supposedly, which I don't believe, to other people, to the people on the other side of that. I think his family, as great of a dad he is, I think they can't discount the truth of how much of a violent sexual predator, stalker, like I said, to some people in this town, Lois and Bo and everybody, the Clemens, he was the devil. Like, he was the boogeyman. This is Freddy Krueger that's literally standing outside your window at night. Like, you're sleeping with your spouse and you turn in the bed and fucking Ken McElroy standing outside your window and has shot multiple people for nothing, for no reason except standing. And you now has some perceived grudge against you. So yeah, when he decided to make himself Michael Myers, like an actual terrorizing figure because he liked the power of it, it's like kind of the natural conclusion, right? Is like any movie where we have a villain, the whole story concludes that everyone bands together and solves it. And it's kind of wild to see in real life when exactly what we all celebrate in a ton of movies all the time happened. It's like, these people are monsters.
Yeah.
And you're like, kind of, yeah, but I don't know.
I mean, the monster to me is Ken, 100%.
Yeah.
As far as Trina, maybe he shouldn't have done what he did. Well, there's no maybe, but they shouldn't have either. Then my question would be, then what should they have done? Because going to the cops and all of that wasn't working. So then if you're like, I have to protect my family and myself. So if no one's going to do it for me or help me, then I'm taking matters into my own hands. And I can't blame somebody for that.
No, I agree. And I was going to say, like, you know, in the law, it says you can defend yourself if you're in an imminent fear of bodily harm. And I think Ken McElroy set it up to where everyone that was around him was constantly in imminent fear of bodily harm. I mean, he's standing in the bar with a bayonet on bond, told you can't take a gun. So it's like bond doesn't matter. Threat of jail doesn't matter. He's got a gun and he's like, I'm going to go shoot Bo Bowenkamp in the face right now so he can't testify. And but for Dr. Bob Kelso standing up and going like hell you will. No, like in that moment, Bob Kelso, that's defensive others. Like Pete Ward is his real name. You know, Pete Ward was standing up in defense of his friend who had already gotten a fucking shot in the neck that got infected. It was like, he's an old man. He doesn't even get shot in the neck.
No. And then he had the courage to go to the cops and take him to trial.
And say, I'm going to write my name on the dotted line. So it's like every time you see that they were doing exactly what the law asks of you and how it failed and it failed and it failed. It's like, in this case, yes, at the exact second that they took aim at Kim McElroy, he wasn't threatening them. But do you think him standing in that truck and 60 people around him, if they hadn't shot him, he wouldn't have gunned the engine and run some of them over?
Yeah. Or gone around that night and taken every single one of them out?
And it had loudly to every one of those people, almost every one of those people out there, told him that he would burn their house down and rape their kids and rape their women and kill their dog and shoot their horse and, you know, whatever. It's like, we're all now in imminent fear of bodily harm from you because you showed Romaine Henry was working in his shed and you shot him in the gut. Bo Bowenkamp was working in his store and you shot him in the throat. Like, you showed that
the one man was driving down the street and got shot in his stomach.
Yes, it's like, what are you even doing? So it's like, and these were just the ones we had time to fit into these episodes. There were so many other cases where he held people at gunpoint, and not to mention all the shit that he stole. But I don't even count that because he has so many other like crimes against people.
And those are just the ones that we know of too.
Yes,
imagine all the shit he did that nobody knows about.
No, and that's the wild part. So I think he set this scenario up where everyone is now on edge, and I don't think you can be surprised that it reached its natural conclusion. Yeah. Now, you know, this has gone down as like, if you look at like list of vigilantes or whatever in history, this is always like number one. You know, it's cited in textbooks as a vigilante case, you know, in psychology textbooks or legal textbooks or whatever. But oftentimes those are not going to have enough space to fully cover, which I'm glad we did this in 3 parts, because I think before you can ask, like we said in the beginning of part 1, before we can ask you as a listener, do you think this is right? Do you think this is wrong? It's like, you have to have the full picture. And this is even like, this is most of the picture we can get. But in those textbooks, like I often wonder if it's kind of like a Kitty Genevieve's thing where we think we know the story of like, oh, that town kind of went a little crazy. And it's like, did they though? Like, do you really know exactly what happened? Because that's not really the way it happened.
Did they go crazy, or did they do what anybody probably would have done when pushed to the brink, and they had the means to do it. I mean, they suffered for so long before doing anything about it. You know, I mean, it wasn't like he did one crime and then they took revenge. This was, 40 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, eventually you're like, I'm fucking done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I get it.
It's like, are 400 people going to leave town, or are we going to take care of this? But I think the town, just by virtue of like circumstances, is on the downswing. I don't think it really has to do with that. But I think from like an emotional perspective, until the townspeople stop defending it, I don't think that healing will happen, but none of them seem like they want to. Like, no one saw a thing. Britt Small, who's like an excellent character. I mean, he's a real person. He was great, but he's like, him and his son both are on there kind of like, this is America, right? Like there's gotta be somebody that's going to stand up and be righteous. And like, that's how they view it, right? They don't view it as like, we shot a guy in the street. They view it as the righteous prevailed, evil was killed. And it just goes to show kind of like what somebody's belief will let them hang on to for this long. But I think at the end of the day, the system is to blame. It was manipulated at every point. And it shows us when you see huge bullies like Kim McElroy, somebody who sees the rule of law, who sees the system we have as something for him to manipulate for his own gain, or go, oh, it's based on decorum and norms. Well, I'm just not going to do any of those. Fuck it. And the system almost doesn't know how to react. You see how fragile our system is. And the Small family and No One Saw a Thing, their kind of arguments like, we're here to make sure the system continues working, even if we have to work outside of it. Yeah. And that's a perspective, certainly.
I agree. The system is to blame at the heart of it, not for McElroy and him beginning his criminal career, but certainly being aware of it multiple times and doing nothing and being paid off, and his lawyer as well. I mean, he's supposed to be working for, the right side of stuff too. So you got to kind of blame yourself when you're like, well, we let this happen, so we can't really punish them now, because if we'd done our job 40 years ago, we wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. And you can see from his family's perspective, right? Like, well, you guys talk about the system so much, and now all of a sudden you don't want to use it to help us. And it's like, well, on the flip side, when your dad was the one stomping all over the system, he didn't want anybody to use it against him. So it becomes like a good for the goose, good for the gander kind of thing. But the very first judge I interned for in law school, Judge Tapscott, who was a phenomenal judge and a great lawyer. And he would say to jurors when they were being sworn in for jury duty, he was like, thank you all for, and actually when they came in for jury duty, he would say, thank you all for being here. The American jury system is so vital, because having courts like this is what allows us to avoid Wild West days where people go and settle their stuff in the streets. And I just think that's used as like what not to do and how great the jury system is, and it should be. And like when it's working as it should, yes. But this case, I think its legacy is just that when it doesn't, people have a breaking point.
Yeah, rightly so too. I mean, what else are you going to do? Just wait for him to come shoot you? I mean, everyone was a target. Everyone was vulnerable. Nobody was safe. So you either leave town or you're like, no, I'm going to stay here, and we're going to just be one less population minus one.
Yeah, population 399. But Harry McLean, who spent all that time working on the book and wrote it, and like I said, if you want more on this, that book is the way to go. But he said his feelings kind of about Trina, which I think can be applied sort of to the McElroy family as a whole, had gone full circle from sympathy and pity to distaste and distrust and back several times. And I think that shows like somebody who's like even way, way more into the case than we could ever be, because he was like literally sitting across the desk talking to people like even he didn't have a clear answer. And I think that may be the answer of why we love to see a vigilante in a movie, but not in real life, because in movies, like lines are really clear between black and white. In real life, it's not.
Or is it?
Right? Or is it?
I mean, there's a pretty black and white line of what crimes you cannot commit. And he stepped over every single one of them.
And
There
I
was
think
really
his
no
victims,
gray areas in his crimes.
no, 100%. He was, and like he was on the wrong side of it. But then it's like, the eye for an eye. But I think the family who was at most of his ire, who was the greatest of targets, like the Boeing camps, like they're feeling like he asked for it, literally.
Yeah.
Like he literally said, no witnesses. I'm not going to court. This is how, like, that's what he wanted. All right. You got what you wanted. You came and fucked with us for no reason but a piece of candy.
Yeah.
No reason. Like, bye. I don't feel anything.
No.
Except relief, a huge sigh of relief.
Yes.
And like, that's fair. Honestly, that's why I asked my therapist before when we very first started this case, I was like, is it fine that I like feel good that this person who like people loved him was dead? And she's like, everybody's entitled to have their own feeling when someone dies. And like, she's like, for some people, when someone dies, it's the best day of their life because that person was their tormentor, their abuser or whatever. And like, that's valid.
And even if they weren't, there's oftentimes with death a sense of that relief just because maybe you were caring for a sick parent or something and that burden is lifted and a lot of guilt comes along with that, but it is a natural and common human emotion to have. So I think it's natural too to be like, I could care less. In fact, I'm pretty happy that happened because he nearly killed my fucking father on his 70th birthday. So I'm good.
Yeah. Right. And you know what? She ain't wrong. And hearing her talk, that is a good lady. Like that's a good person. But you can see how being subjected of what she was subjected to, what would turn her that way. Yeah. And like in that case, isn't it good that catalyst of turning people into that is now gone?
It's an interesting case, the whole thing, and brings up a lot of interesting questions that the answers are different for each person, where you kind of stand, or maybe it's one of those things where until you are put in that position, you can't really say what you would do. We think we know, but then you get into that position and you're like, well, it feels a lot different now than I thought it would.
Exactly. So yeah, y'all let us know what you think. So leave us comments or whatever. If you've heard of this case or in fact, if you're from that area, I'm sure it's one of those where somebody knows somebody that's from the area. So feel free to write that into Freaky Friday. We always love to hear about personal connections to cases and how it's perceived in that area.
Yeah. And the No One Saw thing is very good. The In Broad Daylight. So
yeah, check them out.
Even the Brian Dennehy movie,
Honestly, it was wild to me. It was wild to me. I was like, these are just like direct quotes from like court cases that people were just saying. And I was like, oh, this is like a direct quote from our show because we were quoting the court case from the book. But that's how unbelievable this story is that almost with only like a hair's difference, like names were changed. Not even he looks exactly like him, but like hair
a little
colors,
bit like
we get it.
But like you can't change the names and have everything be the same. It's like the what was that one we covered? Oh, the Sun Gym Gang murders, where in the movie it was like everything was the same, but they changed like the name of one person, but it was very clear who it was about. And the family's like, we know who this is about. Like you changing his name, but everything being the same doesn't really do much. So it's kind of weird. Like, why not just have his name be his name and that instead of trying to change it, but all the details are the same.
Right. They're like, it's based on a story, but we don't want to have to pay likeness rights to the family. So for that reason, his name is Lynn instead of Ken. Literally, his name is Lynn. But I mean, I think for that, it gives you a window into like what everyone was thinking, that it is literally a horror movie. Like the villain is killed in a horror movie, except for then what happens when the police show up, when you've finally slain the villain. And I think this case tells us what happens, at least in small town America.
This episode of Sinisterhood is made possible with the help of our amazing patrons.
If you're interested in supporting the show, consider joining our Patreon. You'll get access to ad-free regular episodes, weekly bonus content, you're able to vote on episode topics, join our monthly live streams, and more.
Keep it creepy.
Mwahaha.